Hey, welcome back to another episode of A Warrior Spirit, where we let the inner warrior shine in their light. Today, I had the honor and pleasure of interviewing Michael Herst. Michael is a former police sergeant. He is a veteran podcaster of One More Thing Before You Go. He's also a husband and a father and an author, all around well-rounded individual. And I'm just thrilled and honored to have him on the show today. So, Michael, thank you for taking time out of your journey to come share it with ours.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Michael, you currently have a unique story in the fact that you were shot in the line of duty,
I, I'll correct you there. I wasn't sure. I was injured in the line of duty.
injured. Okay.
Yeah, I was injured in
Uh,
the line of duty.
I presumed shot as a cop.
That's
Um,
I,
Injured in
I
the line of duty, but that in and of itself was, life changing for you. But where did your actual journey begin? Where did you grow up and where did you start the Michael Hurst journey?
well, it's been a journey. I'm actually from Colorado normally,
Okay.
and I won't say normally. I should say originally.
Yeah.
I'm from Colorado, and I grew up in Colorado Springs area and Woodland Park, which is about 8,500 feet up behind Pikes Peak. So as I grew up as a kid, I got to see the front of Pikes Peak, and as I got older and raised my family, we got to see the backside of Pikes Peak. So we're mountain people, I guess.
Mountain people.
Mountain.
Colorado is that, I mean, when I was younger, took a cross country trip from coast to coast, just driving back, in the days before cell phones and you had a road map. Like, and
You
Colorado
old?
was by far, yeah, I'm old. It was by far my favorite state. So, did, did you have a hard transition going from the beauty of Colorado to the deserts of Arizona, where you currently reside?
I will say absolutely 100%. If I could say 100%, 110% coach, 110%. I love Colorado. I loved it immensely, and we still do. My wife grew up in the mountains of Estes Park, actually, Colorado, about 8,000 square foot or 8,000 square foot, 8,000 feet
People.
up in
Oh,
the, up in the
yeah,
height, up in the clouds.
yeah.
Beautiful place as well. So yes, I did miss it, but my lifetime in Colorado, again, I grew up there. I enjoyed it. I loved it. That's the reason I became a cop in the area. And I enjoyed being a police officer. And my career started, um, now I'm going to age myself a little bit, if that's okay.
Eh,
A little bit.
I'm aged, so it's okay. Like fine wine.
Like fine, exactly. We're like fine wine. My career in law enforcement it started early when I went to college, if you want to count that. When I first turned 19 or 18 years old, I went into college after high school for criminal justice system. So I always wanted to be a cop. I grew up with a very dysfunctional family. And because of that, I felt that going into law enforcement would help me give back to the world in such a way that I could protect and serve in a very unique manner and hopefully pull people out of situations that I kind of grew up in throughout the way. So in Colorado, you have to be 21 years old at least before you can be in law enforcement. But
Mhm.
my journey took me a little bit longer than that. 1984 is when my career began. Started working for El Paso County as a commissioned deputy sheriff, and then I moved from there into Manitou Springs Police Department. And my career was thriving. I enjoyed it. I became a master patrolman. That's kind of a one striper. And then from there, I moved up to sergeant and had plans to move on up the line. But uh,
So you mentioned that you came from a dysfunctional family, and as a family of dysfunction myself, we have the opportunity to do one of two things: buy into the dysfunction and become dysfunctional ourselves, or try to serve others so that they don't have to go through what we went through. Sounds like, you had that choice and you made the one to go into to law enforcement. Um, do you have siblings that went one way or the other, or are you an only
uh,
child, or
nope, I have siblings. I have a younger brother. He actually retired from the Navy, and I've got an older sister. And she retired here in Arizona. She's the one who brought me down to Arizona, actually.
so you guys all went the way of the non-dysfunction?
I won't say that. I won't
Um,
say that. My brother did have a career in the Navy, and he did pretty well in there. My I grew up in an environment of alcoholism and
Okay.
domestic violence
Hmm.
uh, because the alcoholism fueled domestic violence. I lost my father at a very early age. The last time I'd actually seen him was when I was 15 years old. He died when I was 17 years old. Had just turned 17 actually, and I hadn't seen him, for a little bit prior to that. Didn't know he was sick. He had esophageal cancer and cirrhosis of the liver. So
Hmm.
alcohol basically killed my father. Um, because of the dysfunction within the family, my mother also was an alcoholic. So then she became an alcoholic single mother in trying to
Hmm.
raise three kids. So coming from that type of environment, I was the middle child. My sister left at an early, she left at 16 years old. So at an early age in regard to that, she's older than me, but she still left when she was 16 years old. I became a caretaker. So I think from my perspective, I and from that hierarchy of being the middle child, typically they're kind of caretakers. That's
Hmm.
and I think I took that route was because I became the caretaker. When my brother needed something, and when my father died, I had to become the father figure to my brother, which created a little bit of resentment and that kind of a thing. But it allowed me to, I think allowed's the wrong term. It forced me to grow up before I wanted to grow up.
Hmm.
So, in recognizing what it did to my father and what it did to my mother and what it did to their marriage and then to our family, I made a very proactive choice to not let that happen to me. My brother, on the other hand, is an alcoholic and very strong alcoholic. Unfortunately, he spent a lot of time in the hospital and for various health reasons, stuff like that. My sister, she's thrived very well. She's done pretty well. She has recognized the same dysfunction in our family, has gone through therapy and realized it as well. And she's doing really well. She's beat cancer three times, by the way, though.
Wow. Well, it's, you hear that adage, you grew up in an alcoholic family. Why are you an alcoholic? Well, did you see what I grew up in? You grew up in an alcoholic family. You're not an
Yeah,
alcoholic. Did you see what I grew up in? Like, it's the perspective on life that's going to take you down either of those paths.
exactly.
And I don't believe it's the environment. I believe it's the internal vision of what you see and how
Yep.
that triggers on what you want to do. Some use it as an excuse and some use it as a reason, to
Yeah.
overcome. So when you were in law enforcement, did you get injured in Colorado or injured here in Arizona?
Colorado, I did not, I was not a cop down here. I was not in law enforcement down here. It's in working I love, as I said earlier, I love my job. I worked at domestic violence task force for 4 years. That task force was a multi-agency task force, which basically had we not that domestic violence is good in any situation, but we took the worst of the worst, is
Mhm.
what the task force did. And then I worked at DUI task force as well, right before I retired, and that's kind of what put me in a position to get injured when I went to work in traffic and work in the DUI unit and things like that. I was, excuse me, I my guys, my team, two of my team members had somebody pulled um, up on a property that was not theirs. They were on private property, and the dispatcher had taken a call from the individuals on the property that said, "Hey, we don't know these people. They don't belong here. The vehicle doesn't belong here. Can you come ask them to move?" So two officers responded, and about 2:30 in the morning, two officers responded. The guy refused to cooperate whatsoever, so they called for a supervisor. And then, I had Sergeant, big S on my chest for, because I thought it was Superman too. Sergeant and Superman. I made the mistake of pulling my car directly in front of him. There was a car on the right and a car on the left side facing. The guy was backed up on the property. And when I walked in front of my patrol car, the individual uh, floored it and
Oh,
kind
wow.
of hit me between his car and my patrol car. Backed up, tried to run me over again, and then pushed my car out of the way and took off. Um, that started my health journey from that perspective because what it did was create enough damage to my hips, my knees, and things like this that uh, I developed eventually. Long story short, I ended up developing severe rheumatoid arthritis on top of that in all the places that I had injuries. And I was told by five doctors that I would be in a wheelchair for the rest of my life.
And how old were you at this point, and how long were you on the force?
It would be, so that'd be about 39,
Okay.
about 39
And
years.
how long had you been on the force by then?
I've been in law enforcement for close to 17 years.
Wow. And so you're married at this point and have children?
I was married, yes. Um, marriage, I have to say, wonderful. I can't, I have to say that my family, my wife and my kids, and my sister, my brother-in-law, have been immeasurable in my journey. And, we'll talk about this as we go, but, anybody that's going through the same thing, I would recommend that, you just open your eyes and look around to see the people that are there to help you, push you forward, to lift you when you need it, and to motivate you and to hold your hand when you need it and be there for you because
Hmm.
my family was. My wife and I, my kids were young. I think my youngest was probably 6, 7.
Mm.
My oldest was 10, 7, 9, 10. Um, I haven't had to think about that for a while. Daryl, you're making me think. Um,
Yeah,
So yeah,
likewise.
and we had a very proactive family life. The kids were in dance, they did plays, they did music. They were very active within their life. They played soccer. So, it was difficult to get a determination from these five doctors that although the injuries forced me to retire, they weren't as bad as they were until the rheumatoid arthritis started really developing and rapidly moving forward at a pace that almost was unstoppable. And to be given that diagnosis, and to me and my wife and my kids, uh, profoundly changed our lives, all of us, because I couldn't be the father that I really wanted to be from many perspectives. Although we have a great relationship with our kids, absolutely great relationship, and they were supportive. And what I'm about to tell you, if I tear up, you have to cut this out.
Mm.
My youngest daughter pushed me in a wheelchair around a track where my sister was celebrating beating cancer for the first time. And my daughter didn't balk, didn't budge, didn't cry, wasn't embarrassed. I was more embarrassed than my daughter was in regard to that, and they still support me to this day. Um,
So let me ask you for a moment so that you can collect yourself. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want you to just take a moment. Um, you got injured at age 39. How long before you went into the wheelchair and got the diagnosis that you would never come out of the wheelchair?
within 4 or 5 years, I was in a wheelchair. I was having problems way before then. I actually dropped weight. I went from 170 pounds. That was all muscle, by the way, all muscle.
Oh,
170
well,
pounds.
yeah.
Uh, I went from that down to about 130 pounds.
Wow.
Big drop in weight, and then mobility started declining, and I started losing my opportunity to move, to walk, to take long walks, to get up and out of a chair. My wife had to help pull me up and down and things like this. And then we tried to find a doctor in Colorado, and my sister, the where we lived. Let me back up. I'm sorry. Where we lived, I said earlier, we lived up in Woodland Park, which is about 8,500 feet up. So you can imagine the snow we got. Um,
Hmm.
so we got 30-inch snows. Even it snowed in June. July 4th, it snowed a couple of years, and then it would give us a couple months of reprieve, and then October it'd snow again, and it'd be on the ground for the most part the rest of the winter. So that was really having a negative effect on me. So my sister invited us down here to Arizona, said you should consider moving down to Arizona and see what you can see. I couldn't find a really decent doctor in Colorado and somebody that could really help me because I kept getting told, well, it's just part of the gig and this is just what's going to happen. And, you know, it's so sad. I'm sorry, kind of a situation. That's what I said earlier when you were talking about your own journeys with the medical situations. I got told, so sad. I'm sorry I can't do anything for you. It's just part of
Hmm.
what's going to happen. And, learn to adapt.
Hmm.
So when we came down to Arizona, I was able to kind of seek out a doctor down here that some doctors that were very proactive in helping me to kind of manage my disease and kind of help me to stop progressing with it so much. So it staved off me being in an actual wheelchair for a couple more years. But in reality, deterioration was still happening in most of my joints and so forth. So um, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit. My oldest daughter was going to get married, and I'd been in a wheelchair for about probably 3 years before that, 4 years before that, for about 4 years before she's going to get married. I could stand. If you pull me out of a chair, I could stand. If my wife would roll me into the bathroom, I could get up and I'm going to be blunt. I could walk into the toilet,
Hmm.
kind of walk out of the toilet, but that's pretty much the extent of it. That kind of a thing. My wife still had to help me get dressed, and things like this. Um, the when my daughter was going to get married, she's been married 7 years now, so that'd be 7 years ago. So it'd be for 4 years prior to that. I'd been in a wheelchair since then. This would be, I still get emotional with this. Um, I said, look, Caitlin, obviously we're your parents and we're going to pay for your wedding. And we want to give you what the best that we can do for you. But what do you want for a wedding present? Because, the wedding is part of our parental obligation and gift. But what do you want for a wedding present? And she leaned down.
Okay.
She put a hand on each one of my arms. I don't talk about this too much. She looked me square in the eye and she said, I want you to walk me down the aisle because I know you can do it. So it was at that time that I went back to the doctor that I'd been working with, and I said, we need to do something more because obviously I want to do this and I want this to happen. And we embarked on a journey of finding the right doctor down here, which I did, Robert Berghoff. And we went to see Robert Berghoff as a family. And he said, what can I do for you? And I said, I want to walk that young lady down the aisle. So he did his thing and he came back in and he said, I can help you do that. He says, it's going to be work. There's going to be a lot of work. There's going to be a lot of rehabilitation. There's going to be a lot of fortitude, but let's do it. And we embarked on doing that. And um, one of the best days of my life. I say one of because when I met my wife, when I married my wife, when I Caitlin was born, Cole was born, um, forced me to walk her down the aisle. And I haven't looked back since. So I've had 8 operations since. Uh, I've had 2 knee operations. I've had 2 knee replacements, a left hip replacement, 2 shoulder replacements from Dr. Sheldon Martin. Also love these individuals. They are like family to us because they gave me new quality of life that I hadn't had before and that I never knew existed. I've had friends of mine that I know from Colorado that I worked with that have had operations there for their knees and for their hips, and they still have problems with them. They still can't walk normally. I walk 3 to 5 miles a day.
Wow. And not to take your doctor lightly, and it's great that you got that help, but some of that had to come from your internal work and your internal fortitude. How long was your rehab before he said, "Yes, I can help you," to you were walking?
Well, I'm not gonna brag, but I will say confidently that that's when when Caitlin says, "I know you can do it," it realized that and when I was in the military and when I was a cop, we have a motto that said, "Never say die, adapt and overcome," and I'd forgotten those. I'd forgotten
Mm.
that. So it reignited that fire within me and understanding that. And I was walking without the use of a cane in 5 weeks after my surgery. Dr. Berghoff said it's usually 12 to 16 weeks. Um, so I was cleared. The first one was 5 weeks. No, 6 weeks, excuse me. The first one was 6 weeks. Second one was 5 weeks. And my hip was 5 weeks.
Wow. So this is what's fascinating because my background is in psychology, so I love how the brain works and I love how the mind works. For 4 years, you were in your wheelchair,
I was
and for
100
four
pounds.
years, you thought that was, yeah, you thought that was where you were going to be. And then you got that spark. Yes, there was some medical assistance that helped, but I believe the internal spark and fire is what triggered you to get back up out of that chair. And this is what I try to help my clients with understand. Your why has to be big enough, bigger than
Yes,
your circumstances. You have to have something that's bigger than yourself, because when it was just you and just yourself, you were okay with sitting in that chair. But when it was something that was bigger than you, there wasn't anything that was going to keep you in that chair. You were going to find a way out.
I agree with that. It's interesting because I went through I'll tell I'll tell your audience this honestly. Reality is I was down to 100 pounds. Dr. Volk, I saw Dr. Volk is a hematologist. He's an oncologist hematologist. He's part of this family of doctors that we've got that we trust and know that we and trust. You know, when they couldn't figure out why I went down to 100 pounds, we went to go see this doctor, and he's the one that basically told me that, the medications that they had me on were killing me, kind of a
Mm,
situation. So at this time that Caitlin had ignited this fire to me, I reevaluated all aspects of it because I was depressed. I was angry. I was resentful. I was angry because I was in the wheelchair. I was angry because even though the guy that put me there was in prison, he got 12 years, which to me is nothing. He was charged with attempted murder of a police officer. He went in for a first degree assault on a police officer, pled down to that, and driving under the influence of alcohol when he had like six different drugs in his system,
wow.
um, and a whole slew of other charges that we charged him with. But I was resentful that I was a sergeant studying for a lieutenant's test. I was going to be a lieutenant. Those people around me that work with me or worked under me are now becoming lieutenants, captains, commanders, assistant chiefs, chiefs, sheriffs, undersheriffs, sheriffs. And I was angry at that. I was resentful for that. And I was resentful to a- any any indication around me if somebody would say, quit feeling sorry for yourself, because they'd go, screw you. This got taken away from me. This got taken away from me. This got taken away from me. And it took my family and Caitlin in particular. When I say this, I need to say that I love my family unequivocally. I love them equally. I don't love my kids any more than the other one. You know what I
Right.
mean? When I make this statement, I don't. My daughter ignited the light under my bottom, and it made me remember that it's me, it's my choice. This is where I go back to what earlier before we started this conversation about choice. I realized that I have a choice. And Dr. Berghoff told me that too. He says, you have a choice. You can help with this or you cannot. So when I was sitting in a wheelchair at 100 pounds, and Dr. Volk was saying, we're going to get you off all those medications, and we're going to do this, we're going to do this, we're going to do this. I worked my way up with weight enough to get the surgery first because I had to
Mhm.
put weight on before they started cutting into me. Then I had the surgery. And then I said, okay, Caitlin's getting married at this time. I'm going to be walking in 5 weeks. And Dr. Burgos said, that's pushing it because it usually takes 12 to 16 weeks. And you've got these other issues. I said, I'm going to do it because I'm going to walk my daughter.
You put that Superman back on your chest.
Yes. So I will tell you that anybody, any one of you that go through any situation similar to mine or any obstacle in life that happens to put a roadblock in front of your positive forward path, that you may go through the anger, the resentment, the depression, feel sorry for yourself, because I did all of those. I did every one of them. I had to recognize that, yes, I still have a wife that loves me. Yes, I still have a wife that's still here that could have walked away from this. It didn't. That I have two children that thought nothing less of me for being in a wheelchair, that still respected me as a father, not as a burden, but as a father. My wife, not as a burden, as a husband, a human being, a person. I recognized that. Once I recognized that, I started going, I need to take a positive approach and a proactive approach to get myself away from here and out of this situation. So, on this journey, I learned to meditate. I've changed my diet. I'm primarily vegan. I still eat fish, but I'm primarily vegan. I take the right herbs and supplements to help benefit me in a positive way so that this rheumatoid arthritis will not continue to chew away my body like it is. Because when I do have flares, still a disease, I still deal with it. I still have limitations with my disabilities, but my outlook on those disabilities are different than when they were, 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, or even 10 years ago. It,
Well, you
it,
stopped looking at them as a handicap and started looking at them as this is what I need to deal with and live with. So
exactly,
how can I live with it to actually live the best life possible?
exactly.
You went from that victim mentality to that victor mentality, and it changed your world and your perspective. And so, how do you go from walking your daughter down to the aisle to uh, really successful podcaster? And you named it one more thing before you go. Why?
Well, I have to go back to my daughter again because when I was done with everything, I went back to university, went back to college, to ASU, and I got a master's degree in interdisciplinary studies with a focus on performance media and digital media, performance art and digital media. And this is part of what changed me. So when I did that, I started my my thesis, my capstone for this program, for the master's program was I had to make a documentary film. So I chose to make a documentary film and utilize what I had learned in university and what I had learned working with these doctors that I had been working with, that there's a more holistic naturopathic way of moving your life forward and to help you from a holistic and naturopathic way. So I studied a little bit of healing with music and drama and art, in music, and understanding the modalities of each one of those artistic endeavors and creative endeavors. I created a documentary that we took people's stories because as a cop, I mean, both personally and as a cop, I never got to say goodbye to my father. I never got to say goodbye to my mother. I never got to say what I wanted to say to them before they died. My mother had a heart attack on the front lawn of somewhere. I didn't even know she was in the hospital for 3 days. And part of that dysfunction from my family, we won't mention names. And somebody called and said, "Hey, do you know your mother's in the hospital?" I called the hospital, and when I called the hospital, they said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Hersh, your mother passed away 20 minutes ago."
Mhm.
So I never got to say what I wanted to say to her. So in regard to that, I kept thinking, when I create this documentary, what kind of an impact do I need to make with it? What am I going to do? So we come up with the idea. I say we because we have a team there to work with when you do this documentary. We have a sound guy, and we've got a board guy, and the whole bit. You have a cinematographer, and et cetera, et cetera. So we got this idea where, as a cop and personally, I can tell you how many hands that I held or how many accident victims I went to, assault victim, domestic violence, unattended deaths that I went to, that they always said, I didn't get to say, I love you. They walked out the door. I didn't get to tell them how proud I was of them. I didn't expect they wouldn't come home. They wouldn't walk back through that door. I didn't get to say what I wanted to say. I didn't get to say I'm sorry for the argument. I didn't get to say I love you. I didn't get to. So I started thinking about that. So we took four stories. We did a thing where we put a call out. I took four stories, and then we created one where somebody got the last dance that they didn't get before they lost their husband. Then we got another one that they didn't get uh, uh, to. I have to think about this because I mean it still touches me. Each one of the individuals that didn't get to say or do, we put to music, we put to drama, we put to art, and we put to dance, so that we created the environment that you got to do and say what you wanted to do. And then I thought, what better way to name it than one more thing before you go? One more thing before you go, because you should always remember that before somebody walks out the door. Say I love you, because you never know what's going to happen. I can tell you
Mhm.
how many traffic accidents that I've been to where somebody wasn't coming home. How many times somebody had a heart attack while they were out walking or hiking. It's you never know. Life can change in an instant. My life changed in an instant from a different perspective, but it changed in an instant. So one more thing before you go was born. I wanted to be a documentary filmmaker, but my health wouldn't allow what I needed to do to accomplish that. So my daughter said, "Have you listened to podcasts before?" And I said, "No." So she said, "You need to listen to this. And I think you could do this and that you would be good at it. And you can turn one more thing before you go into a forum that allows people to come on and tell their stories of triumph over tragedy, tell their stories of overcoming, tell their stories of grief, or of the time that a woman dropped her husband off at the airport and she forgot to say, I love you when he got out of the car. The last thing she remembers is looking in the rearview mirror, seeing him walk to the airport, and getting a phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning to say he landed in Tokyo and had an aneurysm and died. And how she overcame that, how she redid her life and reinvented her life. So, one more thing before you go, it's a podcast. It's a unique conversation about life. Now, it has evolved. It has evolved into many different things because we've got, we're closing in on 400 episodes. I've done close to, almost close to 500 conversations, interviews. It has evolved, so it's changed a little bit from that. We're still a unique conversation about life. We still triumph over tragedy stories, but it's a weekly society and podcast, culture podcast. We offer thought-provoking discussions on everything from pop culture to the metaphysical. We talk about holistic and naturopathic aspects of helping yourself, um, and how to move forward in life. Do what like I did, where I learned a very naturopathic and holistic way of managing my disease to a point that now I'm able to function in society, and I can function as a husband, as a father, better, or and a brother, and a human being than I had before. So it's one of these things where I try to inspire, I try to motivate, and I try to educate with each and every conversation. And it goes back to the same thing I did when we did the documentary. I remind people that, hey, it's never too late. There's always one more thing. It's just like when you go walking out the door, don't forget to say that one more thing. Say I love you.
Mhm.
Say I'm proud of you. Say I miss you today already. You haven't even left and I miss you.
Yeah.
Kind of a situation, so that it can change your life to a point that you don't have that empty space anymore, kind of a thing. And then again, we touch on what's what the alternative, what the options are. If you didn't get to say goodbye, well, maybe you have an opportunity to still have that chance to say what you wanted to say. And that's why the metaphysical aspect of it comes into play. So it is it is my passion now. So I redefined myself and my purpose after I was 50 years old. And I can tell you, after my journey is no different than anybody else walking the same journey or struggling with the same journey or obstacles within their life. You can do the same thing. You can walk the same path. You can look around you and see who can push you up from the back, pull you from the forward, walk hand in hand with you, side by side with you, to motivate you, to inspire you, to give you that spark that my family gave me. Give you that spark to say, yes, I can redefine my purpose. And yes, I can change my life. And then use what I've learned to change my life to help others change theirs.
I think it's very one of the reasons I started my this podcast, and I'm an infant compared to your 5 year journey, but it was a similar reason for starting it to give a place for people to share their story of overcome and triumph. And I've had, like many guests who this is their first opportunity to ever express their story or express their triumph or express their lessons. And I can't even, the gratitude I feel when I see them after the show and after it airs, starting to thrive and step into who they really are supposed to be because they let that burden go and
Yeah.
they actually verbalized, for the first time. So much joy. And I was smiling when you were talking about your capstone because my capstone in my master's program was on how music and the brain heal. Um,
Yeah.
and so I was amused at our mutual thing and also amused at our medical journey, more into the metaphysical. And I can tell you from my experience with my wife, her journey in the 9 years, we weren't as fortunate as you to have doctors who actually helped her. Um, all of her healing has come from her own internal and her own findings and her own prognosis to help herself. And all the medical field wanted to do was prescribe medicines that were like you killing her. And so
Yep.
we had a very different medical experience, but a very similar metaphysical, physical energy healing experience. And I am always amused when the world brings that synergy into my life and brings me people like you who um, are living it and doing it. And so I love that you didn't stay where you were, that your daughter pushed that fire button again, and you found purpose and passion to not only overcome so that you could be a better father, better husband, better, friend, but an impactor for others. Because I may not have been run over, but I can relate to having to overcome. Other
Mm.
people may not be defined or confined to a wheelchair, but they know what they have to overcome. And so your journey inspires people, not in a woo woo, oh, everything's positive kind of way, but in a if you do the work, we can get you to where you want to go kind of way.
Yep, yep, absolutely. Thank you for all that. I appreciate that very much. I think that, and kudos to your wife as well for taking that first step into moving forward in that regard. It took me a long time to find the right doctors. I have to be honest with you. It took me 2005 is when we came down here originally. So, because we've been here 18 years. Um, Time flies. Um, yeah, it took me a while to find those doctors because other than that, I had doctors that literally would just tell me, "Too bad, so sad," kind of a situation. So, well done for doing that. And your podcast brings a voice to those individuals that you're doing the right thing. You're in the right place. You're in the right space because you give people opportunity for a voice, and that's a wonderful thing. And I understand that gratefulness that comes from your heart and your soul. And when you connect with people like that, it gives. That's why I said earlier about when I was telling everybody about my journey, and I said, every one of you out there that has an obstacle that you're overcoming, it doesn't have to be my same journey, but my same journey may not impact you the same way yours impacts. I may not be walking the same path as you, or you may not be walking the same path as me, but your obstacles in that pathway are no different than mine. They're no less than mine. And the situation is you have choice in life. And that choice is you can make the choice to take that step, to take a proactive approach and overcome what you're going through. I have a disease that I manage every day. I have to be honest. My disease has not disappeared. My disease is still here. It's a daily daily business of managing this disease. But I found a holistic and naturopathic way of doing it that involves meditation. It involves herbs. It involves diet. It involves Chinese doctors that I do acupuncture with, and other Chinese medicine, Eastern medicine. It involves work. So even now, every day I have to work at this. And everybody that's out there, if you're listening, you're watching, you have to do the same thing. You have to agree with yourself and those around you that you're willing to do the work. You have to agree. Like when Dr. Berghoff looked at me and says, "We can do this, but it's going to be a lot of work. Are you up to it?" I had to say yes. I could have
Hmm.
said, "No, I'm not going to do this." And they'd have
Right.
wheeled me right out of that room. But you have to say yes to yourself and yes to those around you before you can take that step.
Well, I think that's a very poignant thing that people miss. You still have to do the work. Like we can, I heard a preacher say once, a lot of people sit around and they pray for help from God and they want God to do something. But you know what? What if God's waiting on you? What if, what if your prayers will be answered when you pitch in and go to work? You know?
Yeah.
Um, I think there's a
Yeah.
missed component to prayer and spirituality is that they think this rainbow of good luck is going to come upon them and they don't have to dig for any of the gold, you know?
As a kid, I was always told God helps those who help themselves.
Right.
So, I mean, if you want to, even
And
from that
I,
perspective,
yeah, I totally understand all of that. So I'm going to ask you, and I know that you're still battling some of your situation, so I want to be respectful of your time, and I don't want to go too long for you.
you're
But
fine.
I do want to ask you one question that I ask all my guests, and what does a warrior spirit or having a warrior spirit mean to Michael Hurst? Because you certainly embody it in my version.
Well, a warrior spirit is very easy for me to come out and tell you. You have the ability within yourselves to focus your mind, your body, and your spirit in such a manner that you can overcome any obstacle that's put in front of you, whether it be physical or mental or otherwise. You have the ability within yourselves to reach down and understand that the choice is yours and that your mind, your body, and your soul will work together to bring you forth on a positive path to where you need to be when you need to be there.
I think that's a perfect definition, and I want to more than thank you for your time today. I look forward to getting to know you on a friendship level as well. And I'm gonna throw back your own line to yourself. What's one more thing before you go? What would you say?
I would say believe in yourself, believe in those around you, always be compassionate, always understand humanity in that not everybody's walking the same path as you, and you never know what's going on in somebody's life that put them in the position they're in right now. So be kind.
Be kind. Well, I love that, and I appreciate you, and thank you so much for doing this. And I just wish you a blessed day and a wonderful year.
Thank you very much for it. It was an honor to be on here, and I look forward to more conversations with you.
All righty. Thank you, Michael.